Hey, this week's lecture, we're going to talk about what AI means for the future of digital tools. First, I want to tackle a bit of a question I've been getting from some students, and it's about the role of these lectures. It's always a classic question. Is this going to be in the exam? Is this going to be in the assignment? Is what we're learning here something that's going to be assessed? And the truth is, no, not really. My ruminations on how AI is likely to change the future of interaction design are not directly going to be part of your assessment for this subject. I think you can take the ideas and you can use them to inspire how you approach the final assignment, but not directly. None of the things I'm going to say today, especially the bit where I actually mention philosophy in this lecture, are directly something that you are going to be assessed on in this subject or at any point in your degree. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the purpose of a university degree? Well, I think that's fairly easy to answer: to prepare you to succeed in the world. Whether it's a professional degree or a basic degree, whether it's built on by further education, or whether you are job ready, as the government loves to say, at the end of your 3 years, the purpose is always to prepare you to succeed. But what does success look like? If we focused entirely on teaching you skills, take JavaScript, for example. If we focused entirely on teaching you that, would that help you succeed? If you were an absolute weapon at JavaScript by the end of your program, I don't think that's really going to be enough. I first learned JavaScript in about 2007, and my knowledge from then is totally useless now. JavaScript has reinvented itself at least twice. I learned vanilla JavaScript. I then had to relearn it in 2011, 2012 for the jQuery selector-based era. I've had to relearn it again for the Flux React component-based world, and I'm feeling like that's going to change again soon. I'm already a little bit behind on my ES6 syntax. But that's just one example. If you learn technical skills, even if you learn design methods that are seemingly more technology agnostic, those are never going to be enough. Skills alone are never going to be enough to prepare you to succeed. And there's a simple reason for that. We work in or adjacent to technology, and technology changes faster than you can imagine. So what can we do? We can teach you our best guess. As researchers in this field, as practitioners with experience in this field, we can teach you our best guess at what the future is going to look like. You can trust in us, at least a little, and we will hope to invest in you what we think will prepare you for the industry as we think it will be in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time, rather than what it is today. Because that's when you'll be hitting the strides in your career. That's when you'll be going beyond those graduate roles and looking to make a name for yourself as a lead on various different projects. And at that point, how are you going to leverage what you learned and apply it to a world that is different in any way that you can imagine? How different is the world today than just 2 years ago? How different 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Every time there is a new technology, people just assume that it will let them do what they did before, only faster and more connected. And they're always wrong. When we invented the internal combustion engine, we didn't immediately build robot horses. We didn't really even immediately build horseless carriages. It took a lot of paradigm shifts and struggles and market creation and destruction for us to end up with the motor vehicle as we understand it now. And even that didn't really take off until 50 or 60 years later. But it led to the invention of the suburb, and it led to the invention of the modern metropolis. Everything changes to be faster and more connected, but those changes are never as predictable as you think. Which is why I think the job of a program like this one, the job of a program that hopes to prepare you to create that future, not just to thrive in it, is to teach you how to think critically and creatively in equal measure. I think the job of this program is to give you the tools such that when you're faced with a choice about how that future is going to realize itself, you feel equipped to make the decision that is right. Maybe everybody recognizes that they wish they could learn all of the big picture, big ticket stuff, but they only have time right now to pass their assignments, to hand in their assignments, to pass their exams. I understand that. But these lectures are public. Return to them then in the winter break. Return to them outside of semester time. They'll be up on YouTube forever. And just take a look at some of the bigger thoughts. I think that they're not about preparing you for this semester. I hope they're about preparing you for a career in design and creative technologies more generally. Enough babbling about why you should listen to me. Let's get stuck into this week's lecture. The question I want to think about today is, what does the emergence of AI mean, the emergence of intelligent systems, of machine learning, of deep learning, mean for how we design interfaces? And this, I think, is more than just, oh, there'll be smart tools. Because the question of what is smart and what is a tool doesn't just mean that we're going to have the same kind of interfaces but with AI built into them. I think we're staring down the barrel of a paradigm shift in how we interact with computers. And I want to see if I can unpack it a bit for you today. Let's take the example of a traditional creative discipline. When it comes to how people work with computers, I like thinking about creative tasks, about design, and about art because they are among some of the most complex and ill-formed tasks that people tackle anywhere. And so when we think about how computers will play a role in that, how computers will play a role in the explicitly creative, I think we get an insight into how every other discipline that involves problem solving of any sort, be it medicine, technology, engineering, science, whatever, everything will be affected by how we think about solving problems creatively. But let's tackle that right at the source. Imagine an artist. It's really easy to look at all the pieces of this picture and talk about what their role is. We have an artist, and they are the intelligent agent making the decisions. We have a medium, which in this case is paints and canvas. The canvas is the substrate on which the paints are being placed, and how you can organize those two things together makes up all possible creative acts, all possible paintings in this domain. And then we have the paintbrush. And the paintbrush is the tool, the way by which the creator, the extension of that creator's will into the medium. The paintbrush lets them get the paint and put it on the canvas. Without the paintbrush, or without some kind of improvised paintbrush, there is no artist's will brought forth into the world. Simple, right? We can break these things down into the creator, the tool, and the material. And again, this applies to any other domain, to not just design, but also engineering and problem solving and accounting and medicine. There is the decision maker, the tool, and the material. And what this leads to is this idea that efficient tools, the best possible tools, are unobtrusive. The best possible tools get out of your way so that you can work on the material. They connect the creator with the material in the most unobtrusive way possible. Let's look at some examples. Photoshop. Take a look at this. Photoshop's interface, with its many, many thousands of options, gets out of the way. The center focus of this interface, regardless of how you've set up your workspace, is always on the artifact itself. And you can pick any one of these thousand buttons, any one of these thousand functions, and regardless of how smart they are, they stay out of your way until you explicitly call on them. And it's not just images. This is Ableton, which is one of the leading digital audio workstations for doing digital music or sound effect production. And you can see the same thing here. This interface in the middle, showing all these different highlighted grid elements, is called a piano roll. And a piano roll just shows exactly which sample or which note or which piece of percussion, which element is played at each time. So the x-axis is time and the y-axis is a list of different things that can happen. Again, the purpose of this interface, as alien as it may seem to you, is to get out of the way. There are a million different options. You can see some of them open at the bottom, this saturator, compressor, OTT stuff. I am not a music producer, and so to be honest, all of this might as well be in Klingon to me. But what I can tell you is that just like Photoshop, there are a thousand things, and they all stay out of the way until you need them. And so what I think that looks like is this. The tool gets out of the way and lets the creator connect with the material. It lets you act in the creative domain without anything being in your way. And this is a good idea. This has worked very well. So one quick warning. This is probably the only time during this course that we're going to actually directly touch the live wire that is philosophy, continental philosophy in this case. If you do want to learn more of this stuff, go take a philosophy course. I'm absolutely unqualified to do that, but let's push on for a second. I want to talk about this idea of tool unobtrusivity and how we can best support creative problem solving by having our tools get out of the way and directly connect to the creator, to the material. I want to talk about it in terms of Heidegger's ideas on objects and tools. So back in the 20s, Heidegger wrote these in German, obviously, and I didn't read them in German, so I've got some translations for you. But I will tackle a couple of pretty bad German pronunciations for you. There's these two ideas of how we perceive objects. The first one is Zuhandenheit, which is this idea of being ready to hand, the quality of readiness to hand. And what that means is that you do not really think about an object because you know how to use it. I have written many things before. I don't really think about this pen. I just use it to enact my will in the domain. And someone who is actually good at sketching or actually good at drawing in any capacity would even more so have an intuitive grasp of this object and how to work with it. It is ready to hand, it's just there, you don't need to think. In fact, it becomes like an extension of yourself. It is just a long, inky finger. On the other hand, there is Vorhandenheit, which describes the idea of an object being present to hand. And Heidegger talks about this mostly from the perspective of broken tools. If something doesn't work in some way, like this pen from which I have removed the ink, this you now actually have to consider its presence. You actually have to think about, wait, what's this? Why is it here? Why is it broken? Why does it not work? You are now directly perceiving and being aware of this object rather than just using it as an extension of yourself. And while Heidegger does later on return to this idea, funny story, Heidegger does a lot of stuff that we talk about in the 20s and then a lot of stuff that we talk about in the 50s, and you really do not see a lot of his stuff coming from the 40s. I really don't know why we do not see all of that stuff that happened in the middle. Could be anything. Maybe it's just been lost to time. He later came to talk about how it's not just broken tools, but it's often objects of note, objects of concern, things that are different. Technologies that you don't know how to use, or technologies that in some way surprise you, that put you into this present at hand way of thinking. But it's long been thought that to be creative, your tools must be an extension of yourself. You must have put in your 10,000 hours. You must be a virtuoso in the medium. And what that means is the tools cease to exist for you. They become just extended self. And the question that I would ask is, as tools get smarter, does that way of thinking apply anymore? And obviously, whenever someone asks a question in a lecture, the answer is no. Whenever someone poses a question in a newspaper article, the answer is no. But I'm going to take a little bit of time in getting there, right? That's how rhetoric works. Imagine your tool looks like this. This is the excellent Artbreeder. I got this from Bayrate on Twitter, but the tool being used here is artbreeder.com. You can go check it out yourself. It's super awesome. This is combining 4 completely AI-generated portraits of people or characters that do not exist. And you can see that you can smoothly interpolate between any combination of these 4. And it doesn't just smash the pixels together and make a weird morphy mashup, but it actually generates a character that's like 20% that ugly looking guy and 40% that young girl on the right. It produces a character that you can see is both content and stylistically a conceptual combination of those 4. This is cool, but what's the medium? Is the medium faces? Is the medium these characters? What's the tool? Is the tool the sliders? Is the tool the pixels? Is, as Bayrate calls it, Artbreeder a nuclear-powered pencil? Or is it something else? Because who's the creator here? Does this tool let you get into a state of Zuhandenheit? As in, does it disappear into the background and let you treat it as an extension of yourself? Or is this tool confronting agentful and existing in a case of Vorhandenheit? I should really just straight up apologize to anyone in the audience who speaks German. Here's another example. So this is Google's Magenta Studio. They're now going to take that sample of guitar and generate accompaniment, generate drum accompaniments. This is the Drumify tool. Pretty good. And just to show you that this isn't just a pretty sort of pre-sampled version of Reasonable Drums. Here's a very different, much more groovy bass line. And if we generate for this, we get a very different kind of drum accompaniment. It is clearly a conceptual match. See, it doesn't just do the same thing. It does something completely different that is a match to the melody line that was given. And I want to show you another example. This one is by Gil Weinberg and the the Center for Music Technology at Georgia Tech. This is Shimon, their drummer robot, or rather their marimba player robot. Notice how when Shimon detects a rhythm being played, it's an improviser, right? It's meant to work with people. As it detects that rhythm being played, it actually starts to nod along with the beat. And then when it detects that someone else is leading the audio, it actually looks at them. It takes control, as in it takes musical authority and starts playing. But you'll see in a minute, it also cedes musical control, lets other people take a turn to lead the improv. Just going to give it a minute to do its stuff. So the trumpet comes in, immediately starts running the lead line of the improv, and Shimon steps back and lets the trumpet player take control and starts playing accompaniment stuff, just stays in a steady rhythm. And once the trumpet player stops, then Shimon might take over and run an improvisation off that, run a variation off the riffs that it just heard. It's an amazing piece of technology. But I think that leads to my central idea, which is that Shimon is not unobtrusive. Shimon doesn't always take control. Shimon doesn't run the table. It doesn't prevent other people from doing things. It's responsive. It starts a conversation. It lets you lead when you need to. And it's still very clearly conceptually subservient. It won't try and take the lead and then just run over the top of you. Although that does happen in musical improvisation sometimes with other humans. But smart tools won't just stay silent forever. A truly smart tool will interject. A truly smart tool will sometimes take the initiative. It will sometimes disagree with you. Because if it can't, is it smart in any way? Like, is it actually doing anything except just embodying some process that someone else told it was a good idea? But then we have to ask ourselves, if something can engage in a dialogue, if it can interject, if it can discuss, if it can negotiate, if it can persuade, if it can engage in any kind of dialogue, be it actual words or just an interaction that borders on the dialogic, is it a tool anymore? Is it a collaborator? Is it a member of the creative team? The moment it steps outside of the tool framing and starts becoming an agent in its own right. But what are the boundaries on that? What does it mean to create a dialogue? Where does our pattern, our understanding, our notion of a tool start to fray around the edges? And this might sound like a philosophical question. I mean, I've literally quoted Heidegger to you. But the real question is, what does that mean for the interfaces with which we are going to interact with these tools or agents or collaborators? Because this is the reason why I think that the current approach, the get the tool out of the way, have 47 menu bars around the edges approach, the Photoshop approach, is not going to work, or at least is going to be a bit of a straitjacket. But this approach is not new. You may, if you're my age, be reminded of a way we used to do this, of a tool that used to bring this interaction modality, this paradigm for how we work with computers to our home offices. Clippy, the much bemoaned Microsoft Office user assistant. Clippy was famous, of course, for those who aren't familiar, for just popping up at dumb times and saying things that made no sense, that it just wasn't particularly good at recognizing your intent, and therefore that the solutions it offers as a collaborator tended just to be not helpful. Because I think that means it's not an indictment. Clippy's failure, is not an indictment of the paradigm of an agent that engages in a dialogue with you. It's just an indictment of the technology at the time. This was the late 90s. It's a funny story, actually. The origin of Clippy came from a Microsoft research project called Project Lumiere, which was far less crap, right? It actually did all this really interesting stuff. I don't know if you can read this, but this is Lumiere noticing that in an email, you're talking about scheduling something for 2 p.m. on Friday, and then saying, hey, should I go ahead and schedule that? And then actually asking for a voice confirmation. You say yes, and then it will say, all right, it heard okay. It'll pop that in your calendar. It'll go out and create things for you. And that may not seem like it's a particularly advanced piece of technology. We have that now, right? It's much easier. You can just have something automatically identify that it's talking about an event. You can right click on it and you can save it to your calendar. But you get the feeling that that automatic calendar creation from emails is a relatively new technology, right? I've only seen that in my mail and calendar apps in the last couple of years. But this research was published in 1999. A year which, and I'm always still astounded to realize this, a year in which some of you weren't alive, and a year in which I was finishing high school. These interaction modalities are not new. This work was done by Eric Horvitz, who's still a researcher at Microsoft, and still works on mixed initiative user interfaces and on the capability of artificial intelligence. But the idea of interface agents is even older than that. I'm not talking about going back to the origin of the word robot or how Hephaestus in Greek myth had robot assistants. But as published research specifically talking about interaction modalities, Patty Mays was famous for her work on user interface agents as a paradigm for interacting with computers in the early 90s. This paper, Agents That Reduce Work and Information Overload, is from 1994. And in it, it talks about this paradigm for how we will interact with applications, such that there is a user that interacts with the application and an agent that also interacts with the application, and that they have a communication channel that exists separately from the application layer. They don't just talk through the medium, but they talk about the medium. And that is explicitly about a dialogic pattern of interaction, right? That is explicitly talking about this potential for what the future of interaction might look like in a world where everything is explicitly AI integrated. So I don't think I'm really pushing a narrative that is too avant-garde when this was published in 1994. But I think the time has come that these ideas really need to be front and center in the mind of every interface designer. By the time you're leading projects of your own, I think this stuff is going to be front and center in everyone's professional practice. So I want to leave you with a couple of points that I think are going to shape the future of novel interface design. I think human-machine collaborative interfaces, as distinct from tools, will be mixed initiative. That is, sometimes you will take the lead and sometimes it will take the lead. They will be dialogic in that you have a discussion about the application as much as you interact through the application. And that they will be about problem framing, that is, collectively deciding what it is that you are going to do, as much as they are about problem solving, that is, collectively working on a task. Because that last one will be really necessary if AI is ever going to go beyond robotically automating processes and actually start to become a companion, a collaborator in how we approach anything complex. If we're to go beyond just sort of automation and start moving towards AI team members, then it's critical that they be there when we do the hardest work, the conceptual work, the framing work. Because interfaces that have these properties, interactions that have these modalities, are going to have to be completely different in the way they approach specific interactions. They're going to have to follow completely different patterns. We are going to have to, as a field, interaction designers, we are going to have to work out a whole new way of design patterns, a way of insights, a way of capturing these sorts of interactions and coming up with tools and strategies and best practices for making them possible. Because I think we're going to have to throw out the rule book. We're going to have to think about how to design for digital collaborators, for AI agents on, at least nominally, a relatively even footing with us. If we're going to figure out how these interfaces can actually be helpful, how they can be helpful in creativity, in innovation, in problem solving, in business, in accounting, in education, in finance, in science, in technology, in engineering, I think the capacity for these to affect how we interact with digital products and services is huge. And I think the rules aren't written yet. I'll see you in class.